Up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles. Got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick back, relax, the TWSN.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Sit Down Morning Show with Malik Wright. I'm your host, Malik Wright, joined by my co-host, who's on the ones and twos today, Daniel Alameda. Got a jam-packed show, a lot of stuff to get into, lots to talk about. Before we do, make sure you guys do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. Listen, Daniel, I want to start off over in Dallas, man. Let me just say this. I feel bad. I feel bad for Dallas Cowboys fans. I feel bad for Dallas Cowboys fans because, I don't take any satisfaction, enjoyment out of saying that I don't believe a team is capable of winning, with a certain ownership group or a certain person leading the charge. But I really feel like that is not the case when it comes to Jerry Jones being the lead man in Dallas. It seems like the ego is massive. The ego is bigger than life. And if you didn't get to see or hear the comments he made recently when a radio host was trying to hold him accountable and talk about the errors that have happened under his watch as the lead man in Dallas, you should definitely take a listen. So, Daniel, play the clip.
Me go over all the reasons that I did something, and I'm sorry that I did it. That's not your job.
Well, my job is to ask
why.
Get
a job, or I'll get somebody else to ask these questions, man.
Jerry, we're trying to figure out why the team is.
I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. You're not going to figure out what the team is doing right or wrong. If you are, or any 5 or 10 like you, you need to come to this meeting I'm going to today. There are 32 teams here. You're geniuses.
Jerry,
okay. Y'all really think you're going to sit here with a microphone and tell me all of the things that I've done wrong and without going over the right?
So, for me, after watching that whole situation and hearing the way he spoke to that reporter, it feels like it's a dictatorship almost. Hey, I can't be held accountable because of what I've turned the Dallas Cowboys into. Look what I turned the Dallas Cowboys into. I turned them into America's team. I turned them into the largest, from a fan perspective, organization that's out there. They're worth well over billions of dollars. This is what I've done for the Dallas Cowboys, created a brand that spans beyond just the regular season or the playoffs or the end season of the NFL. The Dallas Cowboys are truly a phenomenon to experience. Never mind the fact that I built a stadium and it's called Jerry's World, not the Dallas Cowboys World, right? Not Cowboys World. It's called Jerry's World. This is a guy, man, that really, I feel like he's full of himself. I feel like the ego is massive. I feel like in Jerry's world, literally in Jerry's world, he could do no wrong, right? Whether that be handing out the contract to Dak Prescott, not letting him play it through, or letting it, get this far along. Whether it be the same for a CeeDee Lamb. The fact of the matter is the Dallas Cowboys are famous and are talked about in large part because of the build of Jerry Jones and what he has done to make the Dallas Cowboys culture almost larger than life. But make no mistake about it, winning in Dallas is not two things right now that they're being known for. People aren't saying, hey, we know the Dallas Cowboys because of how much playoff success they've had recently or how many championships they won recently. For me, the Dallas Cowboys are in a situation in which they aren't going to win until Jerry does one of two things: put his ego aside and shut the hell up, or step aside and let someone else be the lead man. It's been their Achilles heel for a long, long time. Being the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, you got to know, first and foremost, It's Jerry's way. It's not your way. And you have to be comfortable and okay to know that, hey, you're playing second fiddle to an owner that can't get out of his own way. Daniel, what say you?
Yeah, I think that the part that irritates me about this whole thing, Malik, is the fact that Jerry is in this world of his own. And props to Jerry, obviously, when you look at what Jerry has done with this organization, when you really go and take a step back and see where they came from, it's definitely, he's put them on the map. He's put the Dallas Cowboys as the franchise in the NFL, quote unquote, but they're just not winning. And I think that there is a lot of the stigma around Jerry Jones that it's whether it's an added pressure, whether it's him taking too much control, it's just not working. And it's time and time and time again where, hey, whether it's how much he's spending on, these quarterbacks and these wide receivers and how much he's not actually an amazing roster constructor, because he's not. And you look at a lot of times there is a ton of talent on these teams, but they just don't get it done. So my biggest concern with this is the dude just doesn't know how to take a back seat. He doesn't. And he doesn't know how to, really sustain success and sustain serious playoff success. And that's what concerns me. You look at these other owners, right? The Robert Krafts of the world and a lot of these other owners where it's okay for them to take a back seat. It's okay for them to say, hey, I'm going to let my head coach take the role. But the fact that Jerry is so involved in the day-to-day business, look at what Bill Belichick has done, right? Bill Belichick had serious success, but there's serious criticism about Bill Belichick as a GM. There's criticism about, hey, can Bill Belichick do it all? Can Bill Belichick do both? And I think that the league has just passed by Jerry Jones. I think it's time, man. I think it's time to hang it up. And that's the issue, though, is Jerry is prideful and Jerry is confident in himself and he's confident in the roster construction. He's confident in the job that they're doing. And I think he's got a false sense of what this Dallas Cowboys franchise really is. They are the most valuable franchise when you look at the equity and when you look at the per dollar amount, but the actual on-field production and the actual on-field performance, you are not the most valuable franchise. You are not the best franchise. You are a franchise that has a stigma around you that you guys just can't get it done in the playoffs. And a lot of it has this blame on you. So I think him going on that podcast and him saying that, I don't think he's necessarily, that was the most out of pocket thing that Jerry's done. He's done some crazy things. I think it just shows some frustration. And if I were in his shoes, I'd be frustrated too. But it seems like the moves that they're making, it's starting to bite them in the ass. And that's what concerns me, because from a pure roster construction, from a pure Cowboys standpoint, this organization, the team is going downhill because you just paid Dak a ton of money. You paid CD a ton of money. And what's really the next step? You lost your defense coordinator. You're tying your sales to this head coach, Mike McCarthy, and it just ain't working out. So I'm seriously concerned about, hey, Jerry Jones, where do you go from here? Who is the next scapegoat? Because I could see a world, Malik, where they just continue this ride of mediocrity. And at some point, it's got to get figured out. And getting figured out, I think, is changing at the top, whether it's head coach or Jerry saying, hey, I'm going to give somebody else more power.
But, I think the thing here that we have to talk about is you can keep changing and swapping out coaches over and over all you want.
Yeah.
At some point, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, hey, maybe I'm the issue. Maybe the fact that I'm not able to build something sustainable here in Dallas is the issue here. Now, we're not talking about from a business standpoint. We already know business-wise, business is booming for Dallas. It's always going to be. All right, you're going to get professional singers and rappers, whoever that want to perform in that stadium, and you're gonna have so many different events being hosted there. But in terms of actual winning football and success, I don't really know if I see that in their future. And I think that expecting Jerry to change at this point is fool's gold. So I think maybe the team, right, son, Stephen Jones, someone, they need to get a hold of him and say, hey, you know what, we maybe need to reorganize or reshuffle the deck a little bit and figure out how we can build something in Dallas to where you're still obviously a huge focal point, but you have to be okay with taking the back seat a little bit. You create so much pressure, right? If you allow your emotions to take over a game, because he's a guy that's tied to it. Literally, he's signing the checks, he's doing the whole 9 yards. So it's a little bit different, which is why it's always important to have a liaison in between you and said players or you and the media. Could you imagine me at TWSN if I was the person always this like that person, I didn't let you or other people do their job, right? It would create a very tumultuous work environment on a regular basis. So those are my thought process. I think that the whole Jerry Jones thing has sort of played itself out, and it is what it is at this point. If you guys could do us a favor, Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. I want to move this conversation on over to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers are making a quarterback change. They're changing from Justin Fields, who has them playing some very winning football, I would say right now, to Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is back to now being the starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it's a conversation to be had, Daniel. People are wondering if they made the right move, in terms of making Russell Wilson the new starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers, or if this is a bad move because it feels like the Pittsburgh Steelers are winning a lot of games under Justin Fields, even though it's probably not up to the standard that Mike Tomlin would have hoped. So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think that it is a situation where I don't think the move to go to Russell Wilson is a bad thing, Malik. I think it is a good thing. I think the timing is bad. And that's what my standpoint is, hey, I think that Russell Wilson is and potentially could be a better quarterback than Justin Fields. I think that he could fit the system better. The fact that you're 4-2, though, and the fact that your team is coming off a game where you just dominated the Las Vegas Raiders, I would personally wait and see. I would just ride this out. And I think that's kind of the concerning part for me is, hey, what is the world where you succeed with, Russell Wilson, or you succeed with Justin Fields after this? And I don't really see a world where you succeed with Justin Fields after this. And the reason why I say that is, how is it going to get better than what it is now?
Mm-hmm.
Him being confident, him in this rhythm, what you're going to expect Russell Wilson come in, and then if Russell shits the bed, you're going to say, hey, let's go right back to Justin Fields. I think that that's a piss poor way to look at it. The only way that this works out is if Russell Wilson is a much, much, much better quarterback than Justin Fields. And that's the only way I see this working out. And I think there is a world where that's a possibility, because I did see some things from Justin Fields where, he's still not the most consistent quarterback. And there's a world where Russell Wilson does give you a better chance. The way I look at it, though, Malik, and this is something where straight from the offense coordinator's mouth, he was discussing what is the talent of this offense? What is the peak of this offense? He says Russell Wilson gives us, or Justin Fields gives us things that Russell Wilson doesn't. His legs are the X factor. So with Russell Wilson, I think Mike Tomlin is banking on the leadership. He is banking on the experience. And that's what concerns me, because we've seen Russell Wilson, and I truly don't think, Malik, that this team is a Super Bowl caliber team. I think that this team is a fine team. I think they are a good team. I think they're a team that can get into the playoffs. But if I were in Mike Tomlin's shoes, and maybe this is why I'm not in Mike Tomlin's shoes, but I would have just rode out with Justin Fields, at least until you see a serious sign of, holy shit, Justin's looking terrible. Justin, that is not, good quarterback play. And I think that's what concerns me about Mike Tomlin and what he's saying is, hey, he wants excellence. And Justin Fields, he believes Justin Fields was not excellent. Even Justin Fields said, I could have played better. We should have been 5-1. I made mistakes. If I was perfect, if I was playing great, we wouldn't be in this predicament. And I'm just not quite sure that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going about this the right way. And the reason why I say that also, Malik, is I think Russell Wilson's a very good quarterback. I think he's fine. But do I like the situation around him enough to say he is going to play at an elite level? I don't. I think they have fine weapons. George Pickens is fine. Najee Harris has finally stepped into his own. But Malik, is this a situation where they're great, where they're elite? No. So I think that this change to Russell Wilson will keep them where they're at. I think it's a very, mid-level move. And I would just be concerned about what you're doing for your future, because Russell Wilson was 36, 37. So Tomlin's thinking about winning now. And I just don't think that this Russell Wilson change takes you to a superstar level. But Malik, can he be a much better quarterback than Justin Fields? I think he potentially can.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Fair.
I just feel like what Russell Wilson is at this point in time.
Yep.
And if you're talking about you want excellence, I think that's a poor way to look at it. By the way, you aged him by a lot. He's 35 years old. I just wanted to fact check
He's 35? What did I say,
37?
37?
You said 36, 37.
Oh,
I was going to say, damn, I don't know if Russell's that old. Maybe he is. But I had to check that. But listen, if you're talking about excellence, if Mike Tomlin's talking about getting excellence out of the quarterback position, there's a reason why Russell Wilson has been on however many teams he's been on the last 3-4 seasons, right?
Yeah.
And, you look at it. I don't think that's a guy that's providing excellence for you. I think that's a guy that's providing game management. The only way I can see Russell Wilson providing excellence for the Pittsburgh Steelers is if he understands that, hey, I'm not on the same level of a Drew Brees, of a Tom Brady, and the reason why I bring those names up because those are guys that Russell Wilson has talked about in the past that he feels like he's on the same tier as, where he feels like he can lead his own team, where he feels like he can be the lead man in charge. And I think being able to look at yourself in the mirror and be able to say, hey, I'm not that guy that I portray to be. I think that's important. And maybe for Russell Wilson's brand of football, right? You go back to his Seattle Seahawks days when they were winning a lot of football games. It was a lot of the handoff to the running back, but being led by a very good defense, elite defense at that, who were able to get you the ball back and allow you to, again, play a very pedestrian-esque type game. The fact of the matter is the quarterback play that the Pittsburgh Steelers have been getting recently has been better than the quarterback play that they've gotten the last couple of years from a Kenny Pickett. Justin Fields has been an upgrade over a Kenny Pickett, right? He does also provide the ability to extend plays with his legs and also makes things happen with his legs when plays start to break down. I think going to a Russell Wilson, I think you lose that a little bit. I think you're getting a guy who probably is a better thrower of the football at this point of his career, but I think you're losing the athleticism. I think you're losing the ability to make big plays happen with their legs. And I think it's a mistake.
Yes.
I think it's a mistake. I think this is how you throw everything sort of out of whack. I think this is how you get guys uncomfortable. You throw things out of whack and you find yourself in a situation in which you're like, wow, okay, how do we move forward from here?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I definitely think it's a self-induced situation. So if it doesn't pan out or if it doesn't work out, I think Mike Tomlin has nobody to blame but himself. But I think right now they're sitting at 4-2. It could be worse. You could be 2-4. You could be winless, right? It really could be bad. It's not like Justin Fields has been everything that the Pittsburgh Steelers had hoped to see this season. So far, early returns. He's been everything that you would have hoped as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, as a coaching staff. He's been everything that you would want him to be. You want a guy that's not going to turn the football over. He has one interception.
Yeah.
You want a guy that's going to be able to move the offense. You want a guy that's going to be able to extend plays with his legs. This is crazy. I understand Russell Wilson is healthy, and you know what? Tough shit. It happens. We've seen people lose their jobs because of health. Mm-hmm. We have. And we've seen the starter go on, to continue to win games. But to pull the plug on a guy that has literally brought you to 4-2, you're literally right there in your division. You're second place in your division. You're sitting good. Yeah. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Make a lot of sense to me. Daniel, is anything else that you want to add on to that?
And that's the part that pisses me off especially for Steelers fans, I thought you brought up a great point. I think that this is the time for Mike Tomlin to look at himself in the mirror. And I really think, Malik, if there's ever going to be a time for Mike Tomlin to potentially get canned, is if this move goes south. Mm-hmm. And I think the frustrating part about trying to understand Mike Tomlin's logic, Malik, with the Seahawks, it worked because they had an elite defense, they had an elite run game, and God damn it, they had Ty Lockett, they had DK Metcalf, they had some dominant guys. I want to ask the audience, who is the wide receiver 2 for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Because I bet most of you guys wouldn't even say it's Calvin Austin right now. And is that who Russell Wilson is taking deep into the playoffs? Calvin Austin, Van Jefferson, Najee Harris right now? They are a fine roster on offense, but what other quarterback is coming in like a Russell Wilson and taking this team to a much better level than Justin Fields? The only quarterbacks I can say are really top 10 quarterbacks. Justin Fields has been doing his job. And to pull the plug on this, I think you are setting yourself up for failure in the future. And I think that when you look at this Pittsburgh Steelers team, I have very serious concerns about even them the rest of the season. So they're a fine team. They're a team that potentially they'll likely win 9 games. But what is the pathway forward? And this has always been the issue with the Mike Tomlin, regime right now is, hey, this dude is keeping his above 500 streak alive. But besides that, there is no progression. So I'm concerned about this team, and I'm concerned about what the future is, because who's your franchise quarterback now? And there was a world where I was looking at saying Justin Fields could be their guy at least for the next 2 to 3 years. They could test it out. He's young. This is his first spot without, the Chicago Bears. This is his first time to really grow and develop. The Pittsburgh Steelers are making it very clear. He is not their long-term guy. That's what at least Mike Tomlin is making it very clear. So I'm curious.
But I want to get to Bryson Holloway's comment. And he says, are y'all forgetting about the fumbles he has? No, I'm not. And he says the easy pass he's missed. These are things that happen in football. These are things that happen in football. You're going to have even some of the best turn the ball over. Even some of the best fumble the ball, miss passes. We've seen it. But they're 4-2. They're sitting at 4-2 with that guy at the helm. What that tells me is, right, if you're telling a story, right, because nobody's going to look into the intricate details of it. They're going to look at, hey, what is the Pittsburgh Steelers record? The Pittsburgh Steelers record is 4-2. Is Russell Wilson that much of an upgrade over Justin Fields at this point? There's a reason why the Pittsburgh Steelers are also going out there saying, hey, you know what? There is a guy that might be available for trade in Mike Williams. There's a reason why they're poking around that. Because they realize there are some deficiencies they lack at the receiving position. And maybe they're saying, hey, you know what? We feel like we can get better for our receiving core to help our quarterback out. So wouldn't that apply to Justin Fields too if he stayed in the lineup as quarterback? Don't you think that would make life easier for him? I think there are some contributing factors to where the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't think the trade of Deontay Johnson through fully. It puzzled me a little bit because I thought that he was probably the best receiver that they had. I don't know. To me, I think that Justin Fields makes a lot of sense. And for what Russell, it's not like you feel like you're pushed to play Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is making almost a vet minimum contract.
Yes.
Maybe a little bit above a vet minimum contract. There's a lot of incentives based in there for him to obviously play. But the Denver Broncos are taking on majority of the contract not majority, all of the contract that he was paid previously. So he's sitting good regardless. But I just think that we're robbing Justin Fields of an opportunity. Not say Mike Tomlin's robbing Justin Fields of an opportunity to see what he actually could be by trying to force the issue a little bit.
And that's the thing. And Izzy brought up a great point. Like, he gave Kenny Pickett a longer chance. And also, this wouldn't be the same conversation. It's not the same conversation as the start of the season. If they started off the season and said Russell Wilson is our starter, in my opinion, that's okay. Give the guy a shot. But when a guy is 4-2 and when a guy is on a roll, yes, he hasn't played exceptional football. But in my opinion, what my thought process is, hey, let him make a massive mistake. Let him be, hey, let him show me why he doesn't deserve to be the starter. And that's how I personally would be running this and say, hey, give Russell Wilson another week to get healthy.
Mm-hmm.
This is his first week back of practice, and we're rushing to say he's our starter. So for me, I think that this move is going to turn out and bite Mike Tomlin in the ass. I think the Steelers will win 9 games, but I think Russell Wilson at the end of the season, we're all going to look and say, hey, either he's the reason why we lost that playoff game or he's the reason why we didn't get into the playoffs. And at that point, you're going to look at yourself and look at your quarterback room and say, well, Justin Fields, should we start him again? And at that point, I think it's far too late. So,
But the way we're looking at it, I really believe that they must really believe that he is the answer.
Yes.
They must have saw something in training camp to make them feel comfortable to say, hey, he's that big of an upgrade over Justin Fields. Maybe they've dummied down the playbook for Justin Fields. Maybe they've watered it down completely to fit his skill sets. And maybe after a couple of weeks, we're sitting up here and we're saying, well, the Pittsburgh Steelers are playing playoff football and we're looking at them and they look damn good. And maybe we're wrong. And I'm willing to say I'm wrong. I don't know. I look at a guy's record and I look at a team's record and I say they're 4-2 and I see a quarterback that has been doubted and has dealt with so many doubts coming in. He went to a tumultuous situation with Chicago Bears organization. And now he's in Pittsburgh where it felt like it was an ideal situation where he had the chance to obviously potentially win the job. And he is the Pittsburgh Steelers sitting at 4-2. And I think it just makes a lot of sense to keep that guy at the helm. But if they choose not to do that and they choose for it not to be their long-term answer, then more power to them. Mike Tomlin has had winning football almost every year. He's been the Pittsburgh Steelers head football coach.
Yeah.
Have not had losing. So I guess why doubt the person who's been at the helm of this thing the entire time, right? So we'll see. If you guys could do us a huge favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content. Daniel, let's move on over to New Orleans. Dennis Allen and the Saints are sputtering. Dennis Allen was a person that they thrusted into the spotlight and said, hey, he is going to be the guy to take over our football team after um Sean Payton left. And I'll tell you right now, I feel like Dennis Allen, I'm not shocked by this. I remember when he was the head coach. I believe he was the head coach of the Raiders.
Mhm.
I believe. I remember how poor they were when he was the head coach there. And I know a lot of people came into the season with a lot of hype. Derek Carr looked amazing. Obviously, his injury kind of put things out of whack a little bit, but it's causing people to question Dennis Allen and his ability to be the long-term answer for the Saints. Let me just say this right now. I am not an advocate for calling to people's job. I don't believe that this performance so far, which you've seen from the Saints, makes Dennis Allen deserving of being fired. Let me just start by saying that. That being said, I believe Dennis Allen isn't the man for the job for the Saints, just over what I've seen throughout his entire coaching tenure. He doesn't instill that confidence, that belief in this team long term. And it doesn't seem from a coaching standpoint that he's on the same level as a Sean Payton or as someone you would hope, you could potentially see yourself winning championships. Whenever you hire a coach, you should think about this mentality. Can we see ourselves winning a championship? Can we see ourselves winning divisional crowns under this coach? For me, Dennis Allen just has not been that. Obviously, he was the defensive coordinator of the Saints with Sean Payton at the head coach, but that's very different from being the lead man in charge. Very, very different. So I don't know. When I look at it, I feel like long-term wise, I don't feel like Dennis Allen is necessarily the guy that they're hoping for, but I feel like the Saints are in a weird spot where are they rebuilding? Are they reshuffling? I don't view the Saints as serious contenders, which is why I sat up here and I said in the offseason, they weren't the team that I was really fearful of in that division. That wasn't a team that I felt like could actually make a lot of noise. There was a team that I felt like was going to be competitive because this is what most Derek Carr-led teams are, competitive. But in the day, you're in a situation in which you are capped at the quarterback position. You're capped from a coaching standpoint. A lot of your stars are aging from Alva Kamara.
Mhm.
It is what it is right now in New Orleans. And I think they're in a weird spot, a weird situation where it's like, okay, do we embrace a full rebuild? That has nothing to do with Spencer Rattler and what I think his long-term potential is or trajectory is. That's just me saying right now, I just don't believe that the Saints are a threat.
Yeah.
I just don't believe that. Daniel, what say you?
Yeah, I think in something that was fascinating, I went and looked at what the GM, Mickey Loomis, what he was doing. He went on a podcast. I think this kind of shows the difference of, the state of the organizations. He went on a podcast, and albeit he's not a Jerry Jones, he took full accountability and he said, listen, guys, the results are not what Saints fans need. This is not the product that we want to put out on the field. But he did urge everybody in the fan base, hey, look beyond the results. He's saying, look beyond the record of 2-4. So for me, I think that the Saints, I think they put their foots in the mouths like 5 years ago, Malik, 4 years ago. I think that they are in cap hell. I think that that's a huge part of this issue. And I think every offseason, it's how the hell are they moving the money around? I think they're just pushing it along and along and along. I think that they really screwed themselves at the end of that Drew Brees era, the end of that Sean Payton era to, hey, really hang on to that, to really keep ourselves right at the edge of playoff contention. And I think that that's the point you brought up. Alvin Kamara, aging, Cam Jordan, aging, all these guys, the guys on their defense are names, but they're not superstars. They're not the defensive line that they had when Trey Hendrickson was the number 2 guy over there, when they had that dominant
Oh,
defensive
well, let
line.
me just say that real quick.
Yeah.
You let them tell it. They said, hey, the Trey Hendrickson is a product uh of Cam Jordan, of the players there. He's not that elite pass rusher that we all know him to be. So I want to exclude him from the discussion because they
Mhm.
made it seem like he was just a guy that was replaceable there.
No, completely. And that's the part where I think that they've done a poor job of the roster construction. And they're a fine team, but even heading into the season, like it was, hey, the offensive line was putrid. They went out, they added the rookie Troy Fautanu, he season-ending injuries, obviously, or the other offensive lineman, but they head into this off season with a bottom 5 offensive line. And how do you expect to have serious success with, Derek Carr, your quarterback? And they look good for 2 weeks on the offense side of things. So This Saints team, I think that they got to look at themselves in the mirror and say, hey, let's plan 3 years in the future. Let's not look at this season. They're not competing this season. They're not competing next season. So I think it's really up to the GM, Mickey Loomis, to say, hey, I don't necessarily think it's all on Dennis Allen, but do I think Dennis Allen is the guy to take them over the top? No, I think he's fine. But Malik, what was his record with the Raiders? It was 4-12, I think, both season. I think he had 2 seasons with the Raiders, 4-12, 4-12. And so far with the Saints, he had 1 season with 9 wins. The rest, 7 wins the other year. And then this season, obviously not off to too hot of a start. So at some point, I think you definitely have to look at the head coach and say, it ain't working with you, Dennis. It ain't working. So I don't think it's his fault, but I think at some point, if they don't get it correct in the next couple of years, I think he could be out of a job.
Yeah, I see that there's a comment in there from Marissa. She's like, ironic for Sean Payton that might have ended Dennis Allen's career after giving him his start. Well, he didn't give him his start, respectfully. He didn't. That was the Atlanta Falcons. But I see where you're going with that. I just think that Dennis Allen is just not a good coach. I agree with you, Sean Brent. I can't believe we're agreeing, man. And 100% I agree with that take. If he's not the guy, if this person's not going to be the guy that you're relying on long term, if you don't believe you can win what championships with this guy, you feel like he's just a placeholder for whoever the next said person is in there, then it's probably in the best interest to move on. It makes too much sense to move on. So that's just my thoughts. Let's get to this question from Evan Knight. He says, does Brian Flores deserve to be a head coach? Could be a great rebuild coach for a team in need of an identity. I think Brian Flores could be a great head coach in the National Football League. I've talked about this before. I thought there was a lot of immaturity that probably took place when he was the lead man in Miami. But again, you're a young coach in Miami. Wink, wink. It's probably a lot of distractions out there, and you're thrust into a spot where you have a young quarterback who's been dealing with injuries or doesn't even necessarily seem like he's fully ready to be thrusted, but you feel the pressure from ownership to play him. And then when things go south, the ownership throws in your face, hey, you know what? Let's go after Tom Brady. Not only let's go after Tom Brady, let's have an illegal meeting with Tom Brady and try to coerce him to come to our team. It was a lot that he had to deal with. But I also thought that he could have handled it a little bit better. I think that Brian Flores deserves to be a head coach. I think that guy is a true difference maker. And the way that he makes lives absolute hell for quarterbacks, it needs to be studied.
Yeah.
I think Brian Flores is going to find himself, even though the situation in Miami ended bad, kind of gave him a bad rap in the league. He's a snitch. He's a second, third, XYZ. Or, Tua had some not so amazing things to say about him and the way his treatment of him. And I think Brian Flores attacked that head on and very respectfully, very responsibly. And I guess the what I'm trying to get to is I think that Brian Flores does have a future as a head coach. And I think there are going to be a lot of teams that are going to be knocking down his door this offseason and try to see if they can get him in the building and see if he could be their long-term answer as head coach. But I think he's a great defensive coordinator. I think he really is sort of reinventing the wheel of how to create chaotic pressures and make things very difficult for some of these quarterbacks. But anyway, what are your thoughts on Brian Flores potentially being a head coach in the league?
I've got 2 different thoughts on it, and that's where I think I'm really 50-50. My thought process, Malik, is when I look at these defensive coordinators and when I look at the head coaches, I think that there's a world, in my opinion, maybe just pay this dude ridiculous amount of money to stay as DC. And obviously that's the conversation that Brian Flores has to have, right? Hey, would I want to stay as DC? But when you look at the highest paid DC is Vic Fangio, is making $5 million, $4.5 million. Why not just pay Brian Flores? Hey, I'm going to pay Brian $6 million. I'm going to make him the highest paid defense coordinator in the NFL, $7 million. I think that's worth it. And I think that there's a real world, in my opinion, where a lot of times we do see these guys go from a coordinator to a head coach, and it doesn't work out. So for me, I think he deserves to be head coach, and I think he can definitely, a team would love to have him. If I'm the Minnesota Vikings, though, Malik, I am saying, hey, let me shell out the bank to keep him as my defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that's not talked about enough is when these coordinators go to head coaching gigs, it's a whole different ballgame. You can discuss so many different head coaches that have multiple different responsibilities, running the defense or running the offense. I think that if I'm the Minnesota Vikings, I am damn sure I'm trying to keep Brian Flores as my DC. But when we discuss Brian Flores as a head coach, I think he can make a great head coach. And I think that there are a ton of teams that are needing head coaches, especially going to be this upcoming offseason.
You know, we've got a celebrity in the chat right now.
Oh my Lord!
Wow, I thought he's back. I thought he's
That's
back
up
from the
early
dead.
too.
He's back from the dead. Young BC, the creator of our intro, has joined us this morning. Appreciate you, BC. Appreciate you, man. It's good to see you, man. He says, would Brian Flores be a better head coach than Zach Taylor? That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
That's a loaded question. I think that you lose something if you go from a Brian Flores to a Zach Taylor. And what I think you lose is you probably lose the players coach,
Mhm.
right? The ability to listen to your players, the culture that he's built. I think you lose a little bit. But in terms of schematics, who is Brian Flores bringing in to be his offensive coordinator? Because that's going to be the biggest thing. A lot of these defensive coordinators get overlooked because these ownership groups want continuity at the head coaching position. They want a guy that's going to be here for the long haul. But they listen, it's an offensive driven league. You know what sells? Offense is sexy, right? And if you're not putting up elite defensive numbers, you know, people don't really care for it too much. I feel like you lose something when you go from when you go to a defensive coordinator in the National Football League. It makes life just a little bit more difficult because you're always susceptible to losing. You're always susceptible to losing that guy, that offensive coordinator that was been really, really good. You're always susceptible to losing that guy to a head coaching gig. In that situation, DeMeco Ryan's going to find himself in when Bobby Slowick does eventually leave to go become an offensive coordinator. Can he rebuild? Can he reshuffle the deck as a head coach now that he's lost an offensive coordinator that's been up and coming? You know, part of being a good defensive coordinator, which I think kind of gives people a bad rep a little bit, but maybe ownership groups should take a little bit more stock in it, is when you hire a defensive-minded coach, right? You're able to look at it and say, hey, you know what? Said coach, said offensive coordinator could be an up-and-coming a good play caller for us. But the issue with that is you can't just poach that guy. Because typically the offensive coordinators you're going up against are already kind of in their spot. It's weird. But I think you can build something special as a defensive-minded football coach. You just got to get the shot. But that's always going to be the Achilles heel for some of these guys. Hey, you can build a good roster, but what happens when people start to pluck that roster away? Does it still look the same? Does it still look the same? And I don't know if it does. I don't know if it's going to still look the same for DeMeco Ryans after Slowick is gone. I don't know if that's true. But ownership groups would rather say, hey, you know what? We always have offense to fall back on versus defense to fall back on because offense sells. We want somebody that's going to nurture our young quarterback. And those two sort of go hand in hand. The problem is there's an overarching need for offensive-minded coaches to sort of build with their young quarterbacks that sometimes people find themselves forcing the situation and hiring guys that are not qualified to be head coaches, all because they have an offensive background. Just because you have an offensive background does not mean that this is going to be the lead person or the person that's going to be able to lead your football team and put up, gaudy numbers week in and week out, but also grow with your young quarterback. I think that needs to be talked about a little bit more. I feel like that's not talked about enough. I feel like people think that, hey, if I hire a offensive-minded coach, then he's just going to automatically get the most out of our young quarterback. You got to hire the right coach. Like, I understand a lot of people are excited about Bobby Slowick, but he's proven that he's done it. I'm not going out there hiring a quarterback's coach or an offensive analyst to be a head coach just because he's been around the right people. No shots taken there, just being honest. You want to make sure you're hiring the right guy, not a cheerleader, not a spokesperson, but somebody that can schematically draw things up to make life easier for your young quarterback, but also grow with your young quarterback and put your quarterback in the best position to succeed. It's a sucky position for defensive coordinators in the National Football League like Lou Anarumo, who I truly believe deserved to be a head coach and still deserved to be a head coach, but he's playing with what he has right now. Spags have been great years where Spags probably deserved to be a head coach. But think about the defensive coaching. Because I feel like that's the one thing year over year that's ever changing. You're not guaranteed a number one defense each and every single year. You're not guaranteed a turnover esque type defense year over year. So it sucks because you could have a really standout year one year where you have turnovers at the right opportunities at the right time, and then you find yourself in a situation in which the next year it doesn't look that same. That sucks for y'all because that doesn't mean you're a bad defense coordinator. It just means that maybe pieces have changed. Maybe things have looked differently. I don't know. Just my thoughts. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I think you're right. And I think that's when you look at the difference between how a Brian Flores would look as a head coach, and then even go look at like what Dan Quinn is doing in Washington. I think a lot of it is who else you bring in. And to go back to kind of what the Brian Flores thing would look like, I think that would just change a lot. And that's the issue is, hey, when you go to a new head coach, the intricacies that aren't talked about enough is, hey, you're bringing with you an OC, you're bringing with you your wide receivers coach, you're bringing with you so many different things. There's a lot of things that will need to get replaced, especially if a head coach gets replaced. And not only will they need to, but hey, the head coach has a lot of autonomy saying, hey, I want this guy, I want that guy, and you got to make happen because you hired him as head coach. So I think that Brian Flores would be a very good head coach. And I think a lot of it does come down to who else do you bring around you. And I think you brought up the great point, D'Amico Ryans. We'll see how they look in the next couple of years without a Slowick. Raheem Morris, we'll see how he continues to progress with the Zach Robinson and the other guy they just brought in, that defense coordinator, Jimmy Lake. So I think that you're right. The defense coordinators are getting a bad rap as well, because the one thing is defenses are so reliant stats wise on turnovers and numbers, and that year to year fluctuates so much along with injuries. So I don't think that being a defense coordinator and being a great one means you have the number one statistical defense, the most turnovers. Turnovers are luck, and year over year that changes. So, yeah, I like Brian Flores, and I think he could be a good head coach.
Listen, we still have our Bengals topic to get to, so I'm going to work a little bit in reverse today. But I definitely want to make sure we get our fantasy football guy in here, Steve Bradshaw. We won't be joined today by Mike O'Hara, but we got Steve Bradshaw here. And he's going to get you all set up with your starts and sits, him and Daniel. So with that being said, Steve, how's it going, my man?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Good. Different background today, huh?
Yeah, I had to move the FTR background, so we'll be putting that back up for next week, though.
All right. Okay. Respect. Well, listen, I asked Mike the same question the other day. I'm going to ask you, how are you doing so far in your fantasy football leagues? How's it going for you?
Pretty good. Most of my fantasy leagues are doing well. I know I mentioned that the home league wasn't off to a hot start, but hot win streak. We're back to 3-3, so I'm feeling good about everything at the moment.
Okay. Daniel?
All right, so let's go over to week 7. Let's talk about some of the guys, some of our best matchups, your best starts and sits. Thursday Night Football was an interesting game, and fantasy-wise, the only guy that really showed up was a Javonte Williams. But Steve, talk to us about your favorite guys, and we'll start off with your best matchups and your best starts. And we'll start off, you can give me any quarterback, wide receiver, or running back. Who do you love this week?
Yeah, one player that I really like starting that I feel like people are kind of sleeping on after a rough performance last week is Brian Thomas Jr. against the Patriots. The Patriots defense, obviously, I get the argument of you have Christian Gonzalez, who's looked great this year. But if you look at the fantasy points allowed to wide receivers as a whole, they've actually allowed the 13th most fantasy points. So it's an above average matchup. Also, if you're just looking at a tool from fantasy points, looking at the expected fantasy points per route run, Brian Thomas is top 15 in that as well. And he's truly proven that he's an elite talent. He's one of the best receivers, not just as a rookie, but in the NFL right now. And he's still averaging with that, rough game, about 15.2 points per game this season. So I think that the Patriots look great. There's even a potential to be a shootout with Drake May. And if he can do what he did last week and improve on that. So he's a guy that I really like. And I think that people are a little bit underrated on him because, he wasn't really a guy on anyone's radar coming into the year.
So we got a question real quick from Joe Hara. Who gets more targets? And looking at the Ravens tight end room, Mark Andrews or Isaiah Likely, who do you like better this week?
I still have Likely a little higher. If you look at the snaps from last week, Likely still got on the field more. So with that in mind, I think you kind of have to go with Likely because he's going to get the opportunities. But it was promising to see Andrews, at least score fantasy points. I will say though, it's not like definitely there's not enough signs to say that prime Mark Andrews is back or anything like that.
So looking at the rest of the matchups, we can go to. I want to get your thoughts on a quarterback or a running back. Who's a guy that, whether it's a matchup that you absolutely love this week or a guy that's just catching fire, who's the guy that you are absolutely starting that people should be aware of this week?
Yeah, so quarterback or running back, a guy that I really like is if he does play, Dave Montgomery,
Yeah.
just because people are continue again, it's the same concept. The matchup isn't fantastic for him actually. They are playing the Vikings who've been pretty stout against fantasy running backs, but also the Vikings I think are kind of one of those teams where they don't have their quarterback, so they're being a little no one really talks about them as much. But I could easily see this game being pretty high scoring. And again, with Dave Montgomery, that's something that you absolutely want because of his touchdown upside. He's a guy that's averaging 18 points per game, yet people are still kind of treating him as a mid to low end RB2 when he's done nothing but put up RB1 numbers every single week.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's a game, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. That's a high scoring game. I think all those dudes, whether it's Amon Ra, Sam Laporta, all these dudes are going to have massive weeks. I think that's a huge game. Kevin Jones had a question for you. Should I keep Curtis Samuel on my bench, or because of Cooper, should I get rid of him? Also, what should I do with Calvin Ridley? So he's basically saying, should he drop Curtis Samuel, and what should you do with Calvin Ridley?
Yeah, I'd probably drop Curtis Samuel. I mean, you're going to be the number 3 option now in that offense behind Amari Cooper, obviously, and then I think Shakur's still ahead of him. Assuming that I know he was a little banged up, so if he's healthy, then yeah, I would drop Samuel. For Ridley, I can definitely see if there's a it's a shallow league and there's a promising waiver wire guy on there that probably shouldn't be there. I could definitely see dropping Ridley, but I just feel he's a very talented player still. They paid him a ton of money, and they're trying to get him targets. They're just very dysfunctional right now, and the targets are god awful. So I feel like it has to turn around at some point. And if it does, I think that could really hit for you because Ridley is still a fantastic talent. But yeah, again, I don't necessarily think that it would be ridiculous to drop him anymore at this point in the season.
Completely. And after we get to Sean Brennan's question, I want to get to some of the guys that you aren't a fan of, right? Whether it's guys that have terrible matchups or guys that you're just a lot lower on than most people. But Sean Brennan has the question about Juju Smith-Schuster. Do you think that his production is sustainable or because of the lack of weapons, or was week 5 a fluke? I mean, he had 7 receptions, I believe 130 in a tutty. What's your thoughts on Juju? Is it sustainable?
I mean, Juju's never going to be a guy, in my opinion, that goes out there and does that on a weekly basis. I don't think he's going to be, they're going to plug him into the Rashee Rice role per se, and he's going to give you Rashee Rice production or even really anything near that. But I do think that he's definitely a valuable flex option at this point when they don't really have anything else. You have Travis Kelce, but he's not really been doing too much this year, obviously. Has turned it up in the past 2 games, but it's still not like they're, and they haven't really any other options. So, like you said, lack of weapons on the Chiefs. I don't think I think it's a little bit of a fluke in the sense that, he went absolutely nuts. But I think he can definitely be a solid, flex type player rest of the season.
Completely. I actually like him a lot this week. And before we get to Max's question, make sure you guys can go check our full fantasy content on the TWSN website down below in the description. Steve and a bunch of our other fantasy NFL. We have a ton of different writers. Go check out the content on the TWSN website. But Max Randman had the question, should I start Tank Dell or Tyreek Hill? And he also said, what's your outlook for Tyreek Hill for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think the 2 are actually pretty close. I still do have Tyreek Hill higher, both around mid to low end wide receiver 2s for the week, even without, Nico Collins for Tank Dell. But you do have Stephon Diggs, who looks like he's still the guy there. Obviously, Tank Dell had a great week last week. One of the reasons why, though, was he did score a touchdown. But that said, Tyreek Hill, I think that he hasn't been great so far, right? The offense has been really bad. And again, with Tyreek, it's 100% dependent on Tua.
Yes.
If Tua doesn't come back, I think that, yeah, he's probably a wide receiver 2 for the rest of the season, probably a mid to low end wide receiver 2. But with Tua deciding not to retire, I have a feeling that he's going to come back. I know they said he's eligible to return after week 8, I believe. So I'm still ranking Tyreek as rest of season probably around a low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2, because I believe Tua is going to come back at some point. And if you're getting a, Tua Tagovailoa, Tyreek Hill connection for your fantasy football playoffs, that is extremely valuable because we saw in week 1 when they were together, they scored 26 points. So
Yeah.
that kind of upside you're not really getting from any other player besides the tier 1 guys, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Completely. And I
Jamar
think that's
Chase,
why
too.
it's different than this week versus the rest of the season. I personally think Tank Dell could have a huge week. But let's get to some of the guys give me 2 guys that you're not a fan of this entire week, matchup or player base. Give me two of those guys that you are fading this week.
One guy that I'm absolutely fading is Anthony Richardson. Now, I was one of the biggest components on rushing upside. I think it is truly important, but at this point, Anthony Richardson has somehow looked so bad that it doesn't even matter that he can run the football when you have a QBR of under 42 for multiple weeks this season. And it's one thing if you're having a quarterback that's struggling and he has rushing upside, and he gets to play a pretty good matchup. He's facing off against the Dolphins this week, who've actually allowed the least fantasy points to quarterbacks this year. So, extremely tough matchup in that regard. And Richardson has just struggled. Again, we'll see. I'm really surprised that they're playing him, to be honest, with how good everything else has been going without him. But if he does play, yeah, there's no way that I'm putting him in my lineup this week, even though I've seen a lot of people rank him still as a low-end quarterback 1.
Yeah, completely. So is there any other, give me one more, whether it's a wide receiver, tight end, running back, one last guy, either that you are fading or one guy that you want to just plant your flag saying, hey, this dude is going to absolutely ball out this week?
Yeah, I'll give you one more fade, and that's going to be Trey Sermon. People are kind of debating him, assuming Jonathan Taylor plays, obviously. But people are kind of wanting to slot him back in as that RB2. And while I think that there is an upside case, okay, if Anthony Richardson plays, that makes it even worse because I think that offense is going to be, worse than it was before when Sermon had that production. He had that one game of 18 points, and then he had that one game of 2.9 points. I think more than likely you're probably looking at closer to 2.9 points because, one, you also had Tyler Goodson,
Yes.
and he looked a lot better. He was a lot more efficient. He had over 5 yards per carry both games. And with Sermon, his yards per carry, his efficiency combined, he had 28 carries, so fairly high sample size, had a 2.7 yards per carry mark. And I believe last week one of them was 1.8.
1.8,
So
1.9,
yeah, it's just not good. I do feel a little bad. I like Sermon coming out. I thought it was a kind of cool story for him to get that opportunity, but he's just not been the guy, to be quite frank.
Completely, yeah, and well, I'm on the same page with you. I think Sermon, regardless, especially even if Jonathan Taylor doesn't play, I think everybody's going to be so high on him. Tyler Goodson's a better running back than Trey Sermon right now. Trey's whatever.
Yeah.
But
Steve, my man, want to thank you so much for joining us, man, for another Fantasy Football Friday. I know you didn't have your tag team partner, Michael O'Hara, here, man. We still appreciate you for making time. Hopefully your Bears are putting a smile on your face. They seem like they're rounding out. They seem like they're starting to do some good things, giving you something to believe in. But my man, I hope that you have a very good fantasy weekend. I hope that you enjoy all the games, and we'll see you back here next week, man.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck to the Bengals, and we'll be back next week.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll see you, Steve. Make sure you guys give Steve a follow. Man, he does some amazing work here at TWSN. He is the fantasy football go-to guy, as well as Michael O'Hara. Want to ask that you guys do us a favor, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content. Want to head back to the NFL briefly before we get on over to our discussion regarding our Boston Celtics. Let's talk about the Bengals, man. So the Bengals are in a must-win situation, right? Zach Taylor's 3-7 in his career against the Cleveland Browns. It's been a long time since they beat Cleveland in Cleveland. They're in a situation where they're facing the real Cleveland Browns. And I'm really curious to hear Daniel's take, so to speak, on this game and the outlook of this game. I certainly believe that this is a must-win situation because, you can't have you can't lose to this Browns team that's sort of reeling, just traded away their star receiver and Amari Cooper. Obviously, Nick Chubb is back in the fold. That always makes your antennas go up a little bit. But you got to imagine he's going to probably be on a snap count to some degree. Not going to rush him back and give him a full workload. But I'll continue to say what I've always said. Don't be the Browns get right game. Everybody's low on the Browns. Everybody's down on the Browns. Browns fans are real, and Browns fans believe that they should really pack the season up, get ready for next season already, and start looking at potential coaching options as well as new quarterback options. But Dan, what are your thoughts on this upcoming game, Bengals versus Cleveland Browns, the Battle of Ohio, Part 1?
Yeah, they play this team extremely close. And not only this team, Malik, every game this year has been a very, very close game. So I think that the Bengals, it's very similar to what we were discussing for the Giants game. You just got to go in there and win. And as much of the discussion that we want to have about how the Bengals looked against the Giants and how they still need to improve, they went in there and got to win. I think it's the same thing because if you can look after this week and say, hey, you're sitting at 3-4, the rest of the season is in front of you. And I truly believe at 3-4, you're putting yourself in prime position. Hey, you don't have to go out and go on an undefeated run versus if you go and lose to the Cleveland Browns, I'm just going to go out there and say, I think your season is looking in the dumps. And the reason why I say that is you're 0-2 on your division. And that's the part that concerns me about this game. But that's the part that makes me excited. I went back and saw what Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase said about this Cleveland Browns team and said, hey, they gave them their props, but they know, hey, they're 0-5, 0-4 against, or they've never beat the Browns in their home. That tends to put some motivation. And we've seen that this team, the Jamar Chase led, the Joe Burrow led team, to where, hey, when there's that added motivation of facing a team you've never beat before, facing a team that, you've got some sort of added motivation to, they always rise to the occasion. And I think that that's what potentially could happen this week. So when I project this game, the one concerning thing is really the late game management. And that's one thing I wanted to bring up about last week's game against the Giants. The Bengals at the end of the game, they got saved by Joe Burrow. And this was one of my takeaways from that game is, hey, that game could have looked a lot different with 2 minutes, 10 seconds left on the clock. Or 2 minutes, 30 seconds left, you went and you ran the ball twice. And both those runs netted you -2 yards. You put yourself at 3rd and 13 with 2 minutes left on the clock, with the opposing team having a 2-minute warning and having a timeout, at least one timeout in hand. And you put yourself in the position to where you forced Joe Burrow to make an extraordinary play, roll out to the left, complete a 25, 30-yard pass to Andre Yoshivas. And if that didn't happen, that's what concerns me. And that's the position that I don't want to see this Bengals team in against the Cleveland Browns, because I feel if you're in that position late in the game where it's an extremely close game, that's where you'd be looking at it. And that's one of my issues, Malik, with this Bengals team and saying, hey, one play could have done it. One play could have. Yeah, why are you putting yourself in that position? That's what I want to see out of this Bengals team. Don't put yourself in that position where it's a 3-point game with 2 minutes left to go. And how you get to that point is honestly, you just got to get your weapons involved. You got to get Jamar Chase. You got to get T. Higgins. This offense is as healthy as they've ever been. And you're week 7. Go look at any other roster. I challenge you guys right now. Go look at any other roster and say, hey, what team has arguably every single starter healthy? And that's what the Bengals have outside of Trent Brown, I believe. Every single one of their offense starters is healthy. And that's what it takes. And if you are lucky, because that's what injury luck is, there is a certain luck element to it. This offense is as healthy as they've been. T. Higgins is finally not in the injury report. He's playing great football. You have Jamar Chase. This offense is as healthy as they've been. You've got to go out and establish the momentum early. And that's where, Malik, I think that this team could, the only way I see them really losing this game is if the Browns start off and keep this game muddy, dominate from the defensive line. But I like the way the offensive line is playing. I think the offensive line has, grown a lot. I think Eric All is a huge addition to their blocking scheme when it comes to the running game on the tight end aspect of blocking. So it's a grimy game. I don't think the Bengals are going to go out there. The spread right now, I believe, is 3.5. So it's pretty much saying, hey, this is pretty much an even matchup base when it comes to division. So I just be concerned about the late game management when it comes to the offense. But besides that, it really is going to be a thing of stop the run and
Mhm.
let Deshaun Watson do what Deshaun Watson's been doing so far this year. That's missing passes and turning the ball over.
Yeah, I think the big thing is also putting points on the board, right?
Yes.
You can't allow them to just dictate the game with the run game, and I think that's going to be a big thing. I'm really curious because the offensive line hasn't been playing up to par this season as well. Will this finally be a situation in which we see like the pass rushers of the Bengals, like a Trey Hendrickson, like Sam Hubbard, like Miles Murphy, all sort of start to round and form and really start to look a little good? I'm very curious to see how it all pans out, man. I'm excited for it. Let us know in the comments section what you guys think about this game. Bengals versus Browns, Battle of Ohio. It's definitely a must-win situation for the Bengals, sitting obviously where they are right now. But if they're able to rattle off this victory against the Browns, then they sit at 3-4. You feel very, very
Yes.
hopeful. I'll say not good, but you'll feel hopeful about the season. And then they got the Philadelphia Eagles obviously coming into town the week after that. So got to be able to take care of business at home. It'll be very interesting to see if this team's able to do so. If you guys could do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or when we upload content from TWSN Studios. Daniel, our Boston Celtics are back in action. Our Boston Celtics, are back in action. And when I look at it, it brings up the question: do you think that this is a team that is ready to repeat this year? Do you think they will repeat this year? I'll be honest with you, the Knicks acquisition of Cat does make me uncomfortable. It really does, because I feel like Cat might be something that they've been missing. I'm really curious to see how they deal out the usage of him. Obviously, and Mitchell Robinson on the court at the same time probably creates a little bit of a porous situation. But Cat right now is slated to be center for the New York Knicks. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. Do you think the Boston Celtics? Do you still think that they're the team to beat in the East? Obviously, they won the championship. So it's easy to say, of course, they're the team to beat. They're the team that last won the championship. They have a potential dynasty on their hands if they manage things correctly. They were able to extend Drew Holiday. They were able to extend Brown and Tatum and the whole 9 yards. Porzingis is still up in the air. But do you think that this is a Celtics team that is ready to take on another potential championship? Or do you think that there's a team that maybe I named or haven't named that can be a potential thorn in their side?
So I've got two things. First off, do you want my honest take?
Mhm.
Like, this is the best team in the NBA. And I'm sorry. This is obviously I'm coming from a Celtics fan. Pure roster wise, who else is matching up with these dudes? Like, I'm sorry. Like, and the one concern I would have is the Jason Tatum aspect, right? Hey, is Jason Tatum on the same level of superstar as a Luka, as a Jokic, as a Giannis? I don't think so. And I truly don't think so. I think if you put him in those shoes, if you put him with the Mavericks last year, if you put him with the Nuggets, obviously different roster construction, I'm not so confident in him being that superstar number one, doing it every single night. But respectfully, Malik, and this coming from a Celtics fan, your roster is absurd. Jaylen Brown, and this is something we wrote about for TWSN. I think Jaylen Brown could go to a team like the Spurs and be that number 1/2 opposite of Wemby and take them deep into the playoffs. I think that Kristaps Porzingis is a player where he is a matchup nightmare. And you go look at any other matchup, he makes your defense and he switches out. Hey, you can't just play your normal center. You have to match up for that. And then, Malik, who else is paying dudes like Derek White and Drew Holiday? I think Derek White is probably the X factor on this team because he is your fourth best guy, but he is the most consistent three-point shooting. He's a top 5 three-point shooter in the NBA, and he's your fourth best guy. So, Malik, this roster is absurd. I'm confident in the bench. Peyton Pritchard is taking a step in preseason. Sam Hauser, I even like how, they went out and they added some guys for, the front court. I like Jordan Walsh. He's really taking some steps as well from what he did last year. And I think I'm a huge Jordan Walsh fan. I mean, he's a Celtics fan favorite. He's bald. He's a high flyer. He's a guy, I think he's got a very similar prototype to a guy like an Aaron Gordon-esque to where he could be that in the future. But this team is just too absurd. The one thing I will say, though, is the talent on the West and the talent in the conference, it's better than it was last year. And I'm going to say, I think the Celtics had an easier run in the Eastern Conference than they're going to have this year. And you look at the West, as good as the Mavericks weren't ready for that. The Mavericks, Luka and Kyrie and having Derek Lively be there for his first real time, they only got better. They added Klay Thompson and they still have PJ Washington. I'm concerned about the rest of the talent in the NBA. So I think the Celtics are the most talented team. I think the Celtics regular season, I'm not concerned about them being the number 1 seed. I think they're an amazing regular season team. It's really going to come down to which team comes out of the West, because Malik, Timberwolves look absurd. The Thunder with Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein, I think the Thunder are going to be one of, if not the best team in the Western Conference this year. There's just too much talent in the NBA. So I will say I'm confident in them coming out of the East.
So I still think the Mavericks are going to be the best team in the West.
Yeah,
this year. Don't get me wrong. I think that the Thunder are a very good team. I know you are really high on Isaiah Hartenstein. Low key underrated passing ability, obviously scoring ability. I feel like it took the Knicks a little bit to realize what his potential was going to be, and they probably shooting themselves in the foot a little bit. But I still think the Mavericks. I like what they did with the Klay Thompson addition. I think that Klay Thompson always made sense for them. When I look at it, though, I think the one thing that does concern me a little bit about the Celtics is the health of Kristaps Porzingis. They definitely on paper have the most talented team, but when you take the matchup nightmare of Kristaps Porzingis out of the picture, well, you just kind of close the gap a little bit. I still think the team is very talented. I still think Drew Holiday is an elite defender. Had spots where he struggled last year, but if Jason Tatum's not getting his offense going, you're putting the prowess solely on a guy like Jaylen Brown to get this thing corrected, to get this thing going. And who else is going to step up? You're not going to rely on Drew Holiday to be that guy, right? He isn't that guy. He's a guy that he has the ability to go off on games. Obviously, Derek White is still in the fold. But when I look at it, I say, hey, you know what? You need Jason Tatum to play like an elite player.
Yes.
You need him to play like an elite player, especially when it matters most in those key matchups against the Miami Heat, right? Against the 76ers. You need him to show up game in and game out. That is what you're paying him for. He is the superstar. This is supposed to be ideally his team, but it really looks like it's Jaylen Brown's team. And I'm not trying to create that line down the middle. But for instance, you need other guys to step up, especially because I can't bank on a Kristaps Porzingis' health.
Yep.
I can't. The injuries have been concerning. And they've happened at weird times, at weird points where it feels like this team is just hitting its stride. I think they're also lose something a little bit defensively at points when Porzingis is in the game. Obviously, he's not the defensive stalwart that you'd hope for a guy that's 7 foot plus,
Yep.
But I still think that, again, the Celtics team has everything in front of them. It's just a matter of them playing within themselves and not getting too ahead of themselves. I think that you need Jason Tatum to play like the superstar, the elite player that he says he is. This guy says he believes he's the best player in the NBA. Well, it's time to show it this year. But I think the Celtics can repeat. I think the Celtics will repeat. But that Knicks game is going to be very, very interesting when you watch them take on. If you guys could do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. Daniel, I want to get on over to you. What are some of your favorite bets for week 7 of the NFL?
I'm excited for this week, and we did a lot of research. So once again, if you guys want a full best bets, simply go to the description. Also, we'll have the QR code right up here to where you guys can simply click it, go to the Patreon. We've got our full best bets, NFL, UFC, pretty much everything you need. Our entire team is putting the content out. So I'll give you guys 3 bets. I've got a total of 10 so far right now lined up. I'll give you 3. Number 1, it's a Justin Jefferson masterclass, Malik, and this is a bet that I am absolutely hammering the piss out of this week. Justin Jefferson has an amazing matchup against the Detroit Lions, and not only does he have an amazing matchup, he has dominated the Detroit Lions. Malik, I'll read you off his stats against them, but quite frankly, you look at this year, he's had 90, 100, 103, 105. He has been as elite of a player, and when people discuss, oh, well, they're going to double team Justin Jefferson, I'm not concerned, Malik. And the reason why I'm also not concerned, the Lions just lost the best pass rusher, and the Aiden Hutchinson. That's something where they haven't made a trade yet. So it seems like they're just going to roll with their defensive line that they got right now. And that's not a recipe for success. So I think that, number 1, Justin Jefferson goes out, catches 7 balls, and I think 125 yards. His line is 90 yards. That's my official play, but 125 yards. He's done that in 4 straight matchups against the Detroit Lions. That's at plus 250. So give me Justin Jefferson over 125 receiving yards. I think we see a master class. And I would also take the Minnesota Vikings in that game. I think the Vikings beat the Detroit Lions. I think that's a high-flying game. I do like the over 50.5. But all around, I think that that's a matchup made in heaven for Justin Jefferson. And once again, I think that losing Aiden Hutchinson is going to hurt this team a ton. Play number 2 that I like, I'm going to go with the sneaky one. It's Demario Douglas for the New England Patriots. I love his over receiving yards at 45.5. And this is something where one of my philosophies is bet on stuff that hasn't been a trend for the entire year. What I mean by that is Drake May has made 1 start this season. He played in 2 games. And when you look at both games, go back and look at the New York Jets game when he came in at the end of the season. What happened, or at the end of the game, what happened that final drive? He targeted Demario Douglas on 3 of his, I believe, 6 or 7 passes. And then look at last week, right? What happened? First game of the season for Drake May. And he went out and he targeted Demario Douglas a ton. Demario Douglas had 95 receiving yards. He had his first career touchdown. I think this is a matchup made in heaven for the Patriots because the Jacksonville Jaguars secondary is putrid. And when you look at a guy like Demario Douglas, it's not like he has to win a ton on the outside. This dude is shifty. He is getting quick passes. And when you look at, this is one of the crazy stats that our guy Evan McPhillips loves to use, his ADOT, average depth of target. It's very low. He's not getting targeted, deep down the field. So what that means is he's winning quick slants. He's winning quick releases. And he's the guy that Drake May is targeting on his first read about 30% of the time. So Demario Douglas, 45.5 yards is far too low. I think we see him have 60, 70 yards. And that game is a London game. So that's going to be the first game on the slate on Sunday. And if I would give you guys one more, give me Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard is the running back for the Panthers, and he's a guy that's not getting talked about enough. I think that Jonathan Brooks, their running back that they drafted this year, when he comes back, is going to take over a lot of that role. But it's going under the radar what Chuba is doing for this Panthers offense. And that's what pisses me off about the Panthers is this dude has rushed for 90 yards in 4 straight games. That's something that only 2 other running backs, I believe, have done so far this year. 90 yards in 4 straight games. He had 100 yards, he had 93, 95, and he's got a matchup against the Washington Commanders. And when you look at the Commanders defense, their secondary sucks. But there's a guy by the name of Jonathan Allen. I believe he's a pretty good defensive tackle. He's hurt, and he just got hurt last week. So this is something where the books a lot of times don't really adjust that based off of 1 week. So I look at the Washington Commanders defense is putrid. I think that their rushing defense is putrid. And I'm going to bet on a guy, Chuba Hubbard, that has no real competition in the backfield. So give me Chuba Hubbard over 70 yards. I think that that's a walk in the park. I would also take him up 90 plus yards. But those are 3 bets that I absolutely love. If you guys want our full best bets, and also this week, there's a lot of unders I really like. And that's something I've definitely been trending towards. So go to the QR code. Check it out. Full best bets the rest of the season. We've got 10 more weeks before the playoffs, 11 more weeks, and we've got a lot more coming your way.
Keeping it with the Patriots, I would say that I like a couple things from Drake May this week. I will say the knee injury is a little bit concerning. He had a secret MIR on his knee, and so you don't know the health status of it. But I'll tell you right now, if he's in the lineup, Drake May, he had a pass for over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns against the Houston Texans. I like Drake May to have over 200 yards passing. I'm sitting at minus 130. And, Vegas has his touchdown prop sitting at he needs to throw 1 touchdown. 0.5, that's it. Literally. That's what his prop is. And I like that a lot. I'll tell you what else I like that's very, very sneaky. I like Amari Cooper. His receiving yardage for his debut with the Buffalo Bills is sitting at 35.5. I like that.
That's low. Yeah.
I think Amari Cooper and his receiving yards in his Buffalo Bills debut. I think that Josh Allen will try to force the ball to him a little bit and try to, get on the same page with his receiver. And they're both vets, right? They're both vets. They understand that, you got to approach the game a certain way. I expect him to be ready. I expect him to have gotten the reps in to make this thing work. So I like Amari Cooper over 35.5 yards receiving in his Jets debut. And I was looking at Saquon Barkley's yardage against the Giants. 78.5. I actually might take the under.
Really?
I think the Giants' defensive line is very underrated. Yeah. And I think they can make life a little hectic for Saquon Barkley. I really believe that. I think everybody's probably going to be leaning on Saquon Barkley to have a big game. Yeah. While I believe he might have a big game in the passing game.
16.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, I think he crushes that. 16.5 receiving yards. I don't know if he has a big game in the run game that everybody's expecting. I think the Giants are going to go out there with the focal point and say, hey, you know what? Let's make Jalen Hurts beat us. We're not going to allow this guy Saquon, who left us for Philly, our divisional rival, to have a big game on us. We're not going to allow that to happen. I think a lot of people's parlays are going to get spoiled if they take, Saquon to have 100+ yard rushing game. I just don't see that happening. I think that Saquon goes under on 78.5 yards rushing, but I think he does show up in the receiving department. Is there anything else that you want to add before we head out of here?
I mean, I got a lot more that I can rattle
No,
off.
no. We
But
don't want that.
I would just say for that game, I like that. And Saquon, something where I've tend to realize things that are being heavily bet by the public. I just stay away, and that's something that Saquon is the number one most bet running back right now, outside of a guy like Derrick Henry. But yeah, we've got a lot more bets on the Patreon. I've got a lot more I could rattle off.
For sure. Make sure you guys subscribe to the TWs and Patreon. The QR code is up top below. I mean, up top. I said up top below. The QR code is up top. I really like some of these plays that we've got going for this week. We've also got UFC plays going on the Patreon this weekend as well. So make sure you guys tap in. We're one week away from another big UFC pay-per-view card. So we appreciate you guys for support. Appreciate you guys for spending your morning with us. Remember, there's only one way you should be waking up, talking sports, joining in on the conversation, and that is the right way. We'll see you guys back here Sunday after the Bengals game as we recap every Bengals game, and I'll be back here Monday morning, 10 a.m. to talk everything through from week 7 of the NFL.
So kick that